Reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 47. Yogi namapi sarve shanmadgatenantaratmana sadavan bhajate yomam samayuktatamo mata. Translation of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. Purport, the word bhajate is significant here. Bhajate has its root in the verb bhaj, which is used when there is need of service. The English word worship cannot be used in the same sense as bhaj. Worship means to adore or to show respect and honor to the worthy one. But service with love and faith is especially meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can avoid worshipping a respectable man or a demigod and may be called discourteous, but one cannot avoid serving the Supreme Lord without being thoroughly condemned. Every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and every living entity is intended to serve the Supreme Lord by his own constitution. Failing to do this, he falls down. The Bhagavatam confirms this as follows. Ya esham purusham shakshad atma prabhavam ishwaram na bhajant avajanati stanad brashta patantyada. Anyone who does not render service and neglects his duty unto the primeval Lord, who is the source of all living entities, will certainly fall down from his constitutional position. In this verse also the word bhajanti is used. Therefore, bhajanti is applicable to the Supreme Lord only, whereas the word worship can be applied to demigods or to any other common living entity. The word avajananti used in this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is also found in the Bhagavad Gita. Avajananti mamuda. Only the fools and rascals deride the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Such fools take it upon themselves to write commentaries in the Bhagavad Gita without an attitude of service to the Lord. Consequently, they cannot properly distinguish between the word bhajanti and the word worship. The culmination of all kinds of yoga practices lies in bhakti yoga. All other yogas are but means to come to the point of bhakti in bhakti yoga. Yoga means Bhakti Yoga. All other yogas are progressions towards the destination of Bhakti Yoga. From the beginning of Karma Yoga to the end of Bhakti Yoga is a long way to self-realization. Karma Yoga without fruitive results is the beginning of the path. When Karma Yoga increases to knowledge and renunciation, the stage is called Jnana Yoga. When Jnana Yoga increases in meditation on the Super Soul by different physical processes and the mind is on him, it is called Ashtanga Yoga. And when one surpasses the Ashtanga Yoga and comes to the point of Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, it is called Bhakti Yoga, the culmination. So actually Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal. But to analyze Bhakti Yoga minutely, one has to understand these other yogas. The yogi who is progressive is therefore on the true path of eternal good fortune. One who sticks to a particular point and does not make further progress is called by that particular name. Karma Yogi, Jnana Yogi, or Jnana Yogi, Raja Yogi, Hatha Yogi, etc. If one is fortunate enough to come to the point of Bhakti Yoga, it is to be understood that he has surpassed all other yogas. Therefore, to become Krishna conscious is the highest stage of yoga, just as when we speak of Himalayan, we refer to the world's highest mountains, of which the highest peak, Mount Everest, is considered to be the culmination. It is by great fortune one comes to Krishna consciousness on the path of Bhakti Yoga to become well situated according to the Vedic direction. The ideal yogi concentrates his attention on Krishna, who is called Shama Sundar, who is as beautifully colored as a cloud, whose lotus-like face is effulgent as the sun, whose dress is brilliant with jewels, and whose body is flower-garlanded. Illuminating all sides is his gorgeous luster, which is called the Brahma Jyoti. He incarnates in different forms such as Rama, Nrsimha, Varaha, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he descends like a human being as the son of Mother Yashoda, and he is known as Krishna, Govinda, and Vasudeva. He is the perfect child, husband, friend, and master, and he is full with all opulences and transcendental qualities. If one remains fully conscious of these features of the Lord, he is called the highest yogi. This stage of highest perfection in yoga can be attained only by bhakti yoga, as is confirmed in all Vedic literatures. Yasya deve para bhaktir yata deve tata guru tasya dekata hyartha prakasande mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. Bhakti means devotional service to the Lord which is free from desire for material profit either in this life or the next. Devoid of such inclinations, one should fully absorb oneself in the Supreme. That is the purpose of Naishkarmya. These are some of the means for performance of bhakti or Krishna consciousness, the highest perfectional stage of the yoga system. As is explained here, we have many types of religious process. And actually the Bhagavad Gita is a summary of all the different main processes mentioned in Vedic literature. Vedavyasa wrote Mahabharata for the common people, and Bhagavad Gita is contained inside that. And there he tries to simplify things. And Bhagavad Gita particularly is a condensation of all the philosophical conclusions of the Vedic literature. So therefore we'll find all the different processes mentioned in the Vedas. Vedas are meant for all types of people, so therefore they offer different processes. The only problem is which one is the best process, and this is where we get confused. So therefore Vedavyasa in the Bhagavad Gita enumerates the different processes and then says which one is the best. And he does it in a very systematic way, starting from chapter 2 all the way up to chapter 7. Actually, from 7 to chapter 7 to chapter 12, these are the chapters which discuss bhakti, Bhagavan. In other words, they are the most important parts of the Bhagavad Gita. And the first 6 chapters are discussing the other processes. And the last 6 chapters are discussing material world, all of the gunas and karma and things like that, and the different activities and different modes of nature. So the middle 6 chapters are actually considered to be the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, concerned with devotional service. Vishnu Chakravarti actually compares the Bhagavad Gita to a box of jewels. When we have our valuable necklaces and rings and bracelets and stuff, you'd like to put them in a nice jewel box to keep them safe. And you have the case underneath, and you have a lid, and you have the jewels inside. So the middle 6 chapters from 7 to 12 are the jewels inside, and the first 6 chapters are the the box, and the last 6 chapters are the lid. So we never leave the jewels out just lying all over the place. We put them in a box. So therefore we have the first 6 chapters and the last 6 chapters, but actually the most important thing is the middle 6 chapters. But they have some container around them. So in this way, the Vishnu Chakravarti points out that the middle 6 chapters are actually the essence, discussing Krishna and Bhakti Yoga. However, the other chapters are there. So therefore we get these different processes mentioned in the first 6 chapters. We get Sankhya Yoga, philosophical analysis of soul. Then we get karma, and then karma yoga, and Naishkarma karma, that is karma without desires. And then from there we get Jnana Yoga, which is more detached still. And then we get the Astanga Yoga process, which is like Jnana, but there's an emphasis again on action a little bit. And then after that, then we get a discussion of Bhakti Yoga. So this verse here at the end of chapter 6 is saying that all the yogas are there they're all recommended in the Shastras, but that yoga is supreme, which brings about surrender, faith, and then surrender, worship of me, surrender unto me, service to me. That is the best of all, he says. This, of course, though it is very simply stated here, and if we look at the whole Bhagavad Gita, we'll find that it's rather obvious. Still, it is surprising how many people read the Bhagavad Gita and don't come to that conclusion. Most people in India read the Bhagavad Gita, and when you talk about bhakti, they say, well, what is that? And they miss the whole point of Bhagavad Gita. So, in spite of the fact that Vedavyas wrote it in a simplified way, rather directly, and we can't really miss the point. Somehow, people still miss the point. So, that is why we have commentaries on Bhagavad Gita also. So anyway, as is stated in this verse, of all the yogis, I consider that he is the best who, with great faith, worships me or serves me. That's a rather clear statement, after going through all the other processes. And again, this is emphasized at the end of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, give up all other dharmas and just surrender unto me. And don't worry about anything else. So this is quite clear here. Yet, it is surprising that people do not recognize this in the West or in India. Even scholars will read the Bhagavad Gita in the West, and they won't come to the conclusion that bhakti is the process. They won't accept it. So, of course, this is surprising because this is what it says. But on the other hand, it's not surprising because if we look at Western culture, for instance, ultimately the drift is towards if we're going to have religion, it'll be a non-devotional religion and an impersonal religion at best. And if we have an impersonal religion, it cannot be devotional ultimately. We cannot have bhakti if we have an impersonal God. Because as pointed out by Prabhupada here, who are we concentrating on? We're concentrating on a person who has a beautiful form, who has beautiful color, who has beautiful clothing, beautiful arms, beautiful face, does beautiful activities, surrounded by wonderful, setting of cows and trees and river, Jamuna River, and flowers, and got garland on. So we're trying to serve a personality, a person. So you cannot have devotion if there's no person there. How can we serve nothing? Could not. Service, of course, here implies not just service, but service with love. When we talk about service, we got devotional service, not just service, because a lot of people in the material world also do service for money. Some material reasons there. When we call it about service to God, we don't mean that we're serving God for our own purposes. We're serving God for no purpose except to please Him. That's devotional service. So, of course, when we serve without motive, we can say, well, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? So ultimately, the only motive is because you love somebody. You do it. That's all. So when we serve Krishna without any motive, it means we're doing it out of love of Krishna, for nothing else. But how do you get love of Krishna? How do you get that? Only by having some appreciation of His form, His qualities, His activities, etc. Otherwise, we cannot have that love. So therefore, bhakti and the form of God and the personality of God they go together. We cannot separate them. So if we have an impersonal God and no form, no qualities, no name, etc., then we cannot have bhakti. But we'll see that most religions tend to go in that direction. One devotee did an interview with one rabbi, I think, a Jewish scholar, and they were discussing about impersonalism and personalism. And then finally the rabbi said, well, no, we cannot accept this personal God. It's anything that's mentioned in the Old Testament that indicates a person is only metaphorical. And ultimately we won't give a form to God or any qualities to God. And that's the Judaic. And of course we find the Islamic is the same. It also derives from the Old Testament. So they don't want to give any qualities or form or activities to God. They may say he's a person, but then they won't ascribe any qualities to him. So what kind of person is that? So therefore we find this in Judaic and in Islam, based on Old Testament. Christianity is a little bit ambiguous because they're relying on the same authority, of course, but generally we do find when we get depictions of God that there is a person there. But generally it's an old man. He's not a young boy. He's an old man sitting on a throne, like a king. So that's the conception of God. But you'll find even the serious Christians will also reject that as being very anthropomorphic. We're just imposing our ideas, human ideas on God and putting an image, but actually he's not like that. So even in Christianity they'll tend towards that. Now of course there's a natural feeling among some people that that's also not proper. So therefore in Christianity actually we'll find they go back to worshipping forms again. Like you have, and especially in Catholic Church, you'll have forms everywhere in the church of Mary and Jesus Christ and everything. Very, very explicit worship of forms there. And in Christianity, they're emphasizing more than God. They emphasize Christ, who was a person. So they can relate to that. That some God you can't see and not know is very difficult to relate to, but you can relate to the person who came in the material world and who preached and who was very compassionate and kind to everybody. So that's why Christianity became very popular compared to the Judaic and the we can say the Islamic idea of God is a much more approachable one. So it becomes very, very popular. Therefore, but when we come to the modern age, of course, scientific age, again, they get back to if we want to admit God at all, it has to be impersonal. Because if there's any force, we think of material nature and laws of nature and everything, but we don't want to think of a person behind there at all. Again, it becomes, because it's a person, then we get back to it looks like materialism or something like that. So therefore, they don't want that. So if God is supposed to be non-material, we should reject all form and qualities and things like that. So therefore, even scientists, even if they have some religious leanings or whatever, they'll tend to think of them as impersonal at best. If they have some idea about force behind the laws of nature, there'll be some impersonal force. So that ultimately influences everybody. Of course, some science influences everybody in the world. So therefore, modern religion basically is impersonal because of that in whatever form. And if we get other religions, they're popular because they're also impersonal. So therefore, Buddhism is very popular. And the Advaita forms of philosophy are very popular also among scientists and other people, intellectuals, for that reason. So in the modern world, therefore, the trend is towards impersonalism. And yet, we'll find Bhagavad Gita does the opposite. It's talking about personal God. So if they read this, then they cannot accept that. And therefore, they just won't recognize this is the ultimate meaning of Bhagavad Gita. They won't accept it. And though it is very clear here. So it is very interesting sometimes you hear impersonal swamis. They also use Bhagavad Gita. And they study Bhagavad Gita. And they lecture on Bhagavad Gita. But it's very interesting how they'll go through the whole Bhagavad Gita like this, but they come up with a different conclusion, in spite of the obvious nature of what Krishna is saying here. So they pass over the main import completely. So that is why, as was mentioned this morning, we have to accept a parampara system. Otherwise, we'll get everything mixed up, and even the most common sense thing gets changed around backwards, and we end up with a different conclusion. So therefore we have Vaishnava Sampradayas who accept the personal God and the process of bhakti. And they clarify all the issues in Bhagavad Gita very nicely for us. If it were not for that, then even though the scripture is there, everyone that would read the Bhagavad Gita would not understand what this meant when Krishna says these words. Very, very difficult for us to appreciate when we got all the ideas in our head. So this is the idea of personal God, of course, is there in the Vedic literature. But then again, the impersonal idea is also there. So this also makes it a little difficult for people because just as they may accept karma yoga or some other thing in the Shastras and say this is supreme, some people also write commentaries on Bhagavad Gita and they'll say the whole meaning of Bhagavad Gita is do karma yoga after everything. So according to our perceptions, we'll pick up one thing and make that the main subject of Bhagavad Gita, even though Krishna doesn't say that. So in the Vedic literature itself, we'll get both ideas coming out. This is the main contention in Vedic literature between impersonalism and personalism. So we got these two groups. Karma yoga and all that doesn't really stand a chance too much because both groups say that this is secondary, lower process anyway. So we got to discuss spiritual process, which is the higher part of the Vedas. So when we get there, then we get this division between impersonal and personal. And this is the whole debate in philosophy in India has been over. Is God personal or impersonal? This is a big debate. So Shankaracharya became the main champion of impersonalism. And the Vaishnavas, starting with Ramanujacharya and then Madhva and then Nimbarka, Vallabha and Lord Chaitanya, they're those persons who argue for the personal interpretation. But both of these statements are there. It's only a matter of which is supreme. Which is supreme. And the acharyas will argue on these points. We can say in detail, they'll argue on these points. On every word they'll argue. And it becomes very technical ultimately and very difficult for the common man to understand. However, it is very important to figure out which is the supreme form of God. Is it impersonal or personal? Because you get a different result. In one result, we have devotion, and we end up with the realization of God, and our final position is we attain a form like God in the spiritual world, and we serve Him. That's our goal. But the goal of impersonalism is completely different. There's nothing there. You just get out of the material world, and that's the goal. So even though we can say both are aspects of God, they're completely different results. So therefore the distinction is very important. Because even though we call them both spiritual, you get such diverse results from them. So that is why the controversy has gone on in India for so long, because we have these two things. So which is higher or which is better or whatever, everyone has arguments for that, why it has to be this or that. But in arguing, generally, you have to do one of two things. Ultimately, you have to take if you're an impersonalist, then you'll take all the statements that talk about personal God, the whole Bhagavad Gita, for instance, and Bhagavatam, whole groups of Shastra, and you have to say it doesn't mean anything. We have to discredit it somehow or other. So that's what Shankaracharya basically does. He says we only accept Upanishads as authority. Ultimately, we accept Shruti, and of the Shruti we accept the Upanishads as the highest authority, and other literature, Smriti, that is Puranas and other works, Bhagavad Gita, secondary only. So if there's a contradiction, we'll accept the authority of the Shruti. So if Shruti says impersonal, therefore we will reject all this anyway. It doesn't matter. And it's only there to pacify the lower people, materialists, and give them some sort of conditional worship, etc. So that's how he puts all this as secondary stuff, and he'll interpret any way he wants. Which is not, very proper, actually, to just dismiss whole groups of Vedic literature and say it's all, doesn't agree with us, therefore we don't accept it. Anyway, that's his argument. He says it's not Shruti, therefore we only accept the Shruti as the final authority. So that's his way of getting around the whole question. In other words, he'll take all the statements that indicate personal God, and he's at liberty to give them an impersonal interpretation. So it doesn't actually mean that, because the authority of Shruti says it is impersonal ultimately. So the personalists, on the other hand, they reject this whole category of Shruti Smriti, that it's not valid to reject the Smriti simply because it's not eternal, whereas the Shruti is eternal. Smriti also comes from God, so in any case it's absolute, whether it's temporary or it's permanent, it doesn't matter. So we cannot put it in a secondary category and dismiss it if it disagrees with the Shruti. So that's one point. So all of the Vaishnavas except Bhagavad Gita and the Puranas and other Vedic literatures, they accept. They don't say it's secondary at all. They give equal footing. That's one point. And actually, Jiva Goswami in the Tattva Sandarbha, that whole Tattva Sandarbha is to argue that the Puranas and Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., they are written as commentary upon the Vedas by Vedavyas, as supplementary things to complete the meaning of the Vedas so people can understand. So therefore, because they complete the meaning of the Vedas, you cannot separate them from the Vedas. Otherwise, it's not complete because they complete the Vedas. So if you put them in a secondary category, then that's not, and say these are inferior, then it's meaningless. So if they're to complete the Vedas, they must be given equal status. He gives the example of a golden chain with little rings together to make a chain like this. So we have so many links in the chain. Now if we want to complete the chain, we have to make a link of gold, not of copper or brass or iron. Yeah? We can't have one iron link and all the rest gold. It has to be the same quality to complete the chain. So therefore, the Puranas complete the Vedas, making it Purna. So therefore, they have to be same quality. They cannot be inferior quality to complete the Vedas. So therefore, it says they cannot be regarded as inferior, and that they can equal status, the Vedas. So as proof, they will stand up against any statement of the Upanishads, whatever the Upanishads say. So it gives them equal status. Still, however, the problem remains. Why the Shastra will say one place, God has no form, no qualities, no activities, etc. That's Upanishads basically. And then we'll find in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and other Puranas it says God has form, qualities, activities, etc. Two opposite statements. Why? So many acharyas like Ramanuja or Madhva, both, they will take the statements of impersonalism and say it doesn't mean that literally. For instance, the famous interpretation of nirguna is not no qualities but no material qualities. That's all. So in other words, we take nirguna not to mean no qualities absolutely, but only no material qualities. It does not negate spiritual qualities. So we'll interpret that word like that. So in this way, there's some, let's say, interpretation of the impersonal words so that they're not so exclusive and absolute. Of course, the impersonalists won't agree with that. They'll say it is absolute. We'll say, no, we interpret it because we cannot have a contradiction. In other words, Scripture is perfect, so there can be no contradictions. So therefore, we have to have some explanation why there's two opposite versions. So you have to interpret some of the words in that case. So therefore, they interpret the impersonal words so that they don't have absolute meaning anymore. The interesting thing, of course, is that Bhagavatam, for instance, says that actually there's not just two realizations. There's actually three realizations of God. That is Brahman, or the impersonal, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. We have three realizations of God. And it doesn't reject any of them. It says they're all realizations of God. It's not that this one's bogus and this one's true. They're both there. Or the three of them are there, actually. Three types of realization. And they're all aspects of one Advaya Gyan, one truth. Then we'll say, well, how can that be? How can the absolute truth have come out in three forms when it should be one form? Absolute means oneness and highest. And we get three aspects of it. So the answer to that is that the absolute is one, but according to our sadhana, we will view God in different ways, even in the realized state, according to our mentality and our desires. And we'll see God in different ways. Of course, that's even there within bhakti. According to your desires, you'll see God in different ways. You may see Him as Narasimha, or Vishnu, or Krishna, or Dwarka Krishna, or Raja Krishna, or whatever. So many ways we can see Krishna also in our realization. So, but then broadly speaking, according to your sadhana, then you get different realization. So you practice jnana, then you get the impersonal realization, because you're always meditating on God has no form, God has no qualities, etc. So that's what you get. Absence of material qualities. And so basically a negative meditation. I'm not the body. I am spirit, soul. The absolute has no qualities, etc. So therefore you get an absolute realization of God, but based upon your meditation. And if you do yoga, then you concentrate on suprasoul. You get that realization. And you perform bhakti and you serve the personal form of God, then you realize that form of God. So in other words, according to the sadhana, then you get a different type of realization. And we can only say which is the better one, or which is the supreme one of all those, even though they're all let's say realizations of God. In one sense, they're all absolute because they're all realizations of God. But the example is given is like this: if we see a mountain at a distance, then we'll only see a little bump on the horizon, maybe bluish in color. And if you want to describe that mountain, we'll say it's a blue bump on the horizon, or some very general description of something. If we get closer, maybe half a mile away or something, then we can describe the mountain in more detail. Or you could say that mountain is, it's got some rocks on it, it's got some trees on it, maybe the color of the earth, whatever, formations of stone or whatever, the shape of the mountain. We can give some more precise detail. So basically, it's a more accurate description of the mountain. The other one's not false, definitely. From a distance, what you see is not false, but it's very general. When you get closer, you got a more particular details of the mountain. So it's more accurate and therefore more true. The same mountain, but it's more accurate and therefore more higher truth, let's say. And if you get very close to the mountain, of course, then you could pick up even more details. Great details about the whole thing. So that's more accurate still. So therefore we can say that the different realizations of God are like that. Realizing God in a very general way, that is Brahman realization, impersonal. Yes, God is something great, conscious, eternal entity, something. General, non-material realization of God. Paramatma is a higher realization than that. It's realizing the eternal nature of God. It's a conscious entity, and He is a personal entity who somehow is able to pervade the material world and sustain it and create it and destroy it. So the material world is related to some sort of creator of some sort. So there's an actual person there of some sort, a powerful personality. So we have some sort of respect for that person. So that's a more correct vision of God than just God as an impersonal something. So he's a spiritual entity, but he's also some personal entity who is somehow, through his knowledge and whatever, is pervading the material world and operating it for his purposes. However, higher than that, of course, is where we appreciate the qualities of God. And the only way we do that is by interaction with God. Interaction means service. So when we serve a person or we interact with them, then we'll understand a person. For instance, if you know the Prime Minister here or whatever his name is, and you have a Prime Minister, generally you probably don't know his personality too much because you haven't met him. And only aspects of his personality you know is because you read something in some magazine or on television or something, but you actually don't know him, so your attraction for him is not very much. And your knowledge of him is very vague at most. So if you really want to know that person in detail, you would have to have a personal relationship with them. Not many people do, but if you're his friend or maybe the son or the daughter or the wife, then of course you would have a much more detailed knowledge of that person than the Prime Minister. But only through that relationship and interaction. So therefore with God also, we'll understand God in most detail when we have a more intimate relationship with Him through personal interaction. That is by service to God. And then we understand God more and appreciate Him more. And, of course, the bliss, ultimately, the satisfaction is more. So therefore we can say that the realization of Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, through bhakti is superior to the others, because it gives a more detailed and intimate realization of God, and it's more satisfying to the soul. So though all these realizations are bona fide in that they're all realizations of God, and still the personal realization of God is the highest. So therefore we say that bhakti is the highest process because it leads to realization of personal form of God. So it is natural it should do so, because we see that in the process of bhakti, the sadhana, that is the practice, we accept a form for God, and we accept service to God, willing service, devotional service to God. That's bhakti yoga. We're doing activities with intention of pleasing Him. And we're doing it as a practice. And we're using our mind and our senses and our material body. But the intention is coming from the faith, is the motivator of everything. And the faith is coming from the soul when we do our activities of devotional service. So that combination of utilizing the body along with the soul's intention, this produces the growth of bhakti in the soul, the relationship with Krishna. Even though it's very slight in the beginning with faith, by continually doing the acts and with that attempt of pleasing the Lord, then the soul establishes a relationship with Krishna. And in the process, then, of doing this, the soul develops a spiritual body. Even though we're working with this body here, because the soul is activating, becoming, getting a relationship with the Lord and serving Him, then the soul manifests a form, and a form also means senses. So, through the process of bhakti yoga, it's natural, therefore, that we should develop a spiritual form, spiritual senses to appreciate God, because we can only appreciate God with spiritual senses, not with material senses. So we develop spiritual consciousness, spiritual senses, and spiritual body to serve God and to interact with God. So this does not happen in jnana. There is no interest in developing service or relationship or anything. And therefore, what is the question of needing a body or senses at all? It's non-functional. Because that's not your goal. Your goal is simply to get out of the material world. So therefore, when you get mukti, you don't manifest a spiritual body at all, or spiritual senses. You're just free of the material world, that's all. And you have a vague understanding, yes, I am free from the material world. It's eternal bliss of some sort. And if one becomes a yogi and realizes Paramatma, we get a personal realization of God. That's better than impersonal. But again, our sadhana is not active. We're not serving God or anything. So therefore, we don't develop that spiritual body. It's a very neutral realization of God. So it's only because we want to serve God and do things for God then we get a spiritual body. So these are the different modes of developing our spiritual life. We have these three main spiritual processes, and below that we get karma yoga, other process, karma kanda, and then karma yoga, and nishkamya karma. And then we get impersonal and jnana yoga, and then we get astanga yoga, and we get bhakti yoga. So these three lead to the spiritual realization of God, but the realization is drastically different in its results, and its depth of bliss. So here Krishna is concluding that this is the highest. Bhakti is the highest process, and realization of the personality of God, that is the highest form of God. So he says here, you worship me. That person who worships me with faith, he is the best. So there he's indicating Krishna. Worship God, not impersonal form. And this is the highest process. So of course this is difficult for some people to understand, especially in the modern world. But it's obvious here in Bhagavad Gita. And of course in the Bhagavatam that is the main purpose, is to show that Krishna is the supreme form of God. And we should worship him with devotion. So it is there. Yet people are still very stubborn, and they want to stick to the impersonal aspect because of their own upbringing or whatever, and their prejudices towards this impersonal for various reasons. So this personal form is difficult for them to understand because of that. Nevertheless, it's quite explicit here in Bhagavad Gita and in Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya has made a special contribution to this because he has said that several contributions. One is in the matter of Shastra, how to interpret Shastra. So he says ultimately God is both things. And as I said, he's, Brahman is one aspect of God as well as the personal aspect. They're both that. It's achintya bhed abhed. Oneness and difference, or impersonalism and personalism. Impersonal is abhed. There's no God and no jiva. It's only one entity which has no form, no quality. That's abhed. Bheda means difference. There's jiva, there's God, and God has qualities and form activities. Our relationship is bhakti. That's Veda philosophy. So he says both gods are true. The impersonal and the personal. Previous, all the acharyas would argue one way or the other. Shankaracharya says impersonal only, no personal. If it's personal, it's material. And then Ramanuja and Madhva say, okay, personal is true, impersonal is false. And it doesn't mean that actually. But Lord Chaitanya says both are true. God has two faces, impersonal and personal. And both are true. And how are they true? Because how can you have opposites like that? God is one and God is two. Because it's the Lord's achintya shakti. It's His inconceivable nature. He can appear in both forms and be one and different. He can be Brahman, which is oneness, and He can also be Bhagavan, with all qualities. It's the nature of God that He can be opposites. We cannot do that, but God can do that. He can be mysteriously be two things at once. Two opposite things at once. Normally not possible Like we have a rose here. The rose cannot be the carnation. How can it be? It's different. Huh? Can an object be both at once? No, there'll be different objects. Huh? But for God, there's no contradiction. He can be both simultaneously and be Himself at the same time. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya says, yes, God is both impersonal and personal simultaneously. And we don't have to interpret the Shastra either one way or the other. Therefore, like that. So that's one of His contributions. Huh? This is interesting because in terms of modern physics even, it looks like the possible solution to the physical world. With the, let's say, Newtonian physics is basically very dualistic. There's little particles, like the absolute particles, atoms and protons and this and that, yeah? And they have some absolute value to them. Huh? Very something like Madhva philosophy. Madhva is very dualistic in his philosophy also. Cut and dry. It has to be this, it has to be that. If it's not this, it has to be this. And very logically he does. It's a very brilliant philosophy because it's so logical. Down to mercilessly logical. But anyway, when we come to quantum physics, you have to throw out Newtonian concepts completely. They don't make sense anymore, even though it's logical to think like this. From our logical point of view, break things down to plus and minus charges and particles and things like that. When you get to actual quantum physics, it doesn't make any sense anymore. And all those things become very, very strange. Even matter becomes immaterial, and it all becomes space, and it's only made up of charges, and even the charges become ambiguous, and they have no location even in space ultimately. So everything disappears suddenly. Huh? So we get this rather strange idea of what matter is ultimately. It's not quite what you thought it was before. So out of all of this, of course, then and then we get consciousness getting involved with matter also in quantum physics. That you cannot separate consciousness from matter. So the whole thing becomes very ambiguous. What is matter actually? In science, what is the relation of consciousness to matter? Everything becomes questionable at that point. What is the real thing? It's not so definite as you thought it was. For instance, the matter, it defies definition in one sense. It can be a particle, or it can be a wave. And if it's a wave, technically it shouldn't be a particle. If it's a particle, it shouldn't be a wave by, physical formulas and whatever. It cannot be both. Technically it cannot be both. It has to be one or the other. But surprisingly, it can change. It can be either. And a photon can be a particle or it can be a wave. It can show the symptoms of both under different circumstances. So it's very mysterious. It's somewhere in between. And you can't pin it down to anything like that. So matter itself looks like it's a chinchya in one sense. It's neither one nor the other. Or it's both, actually, under different circumstances. So, in a big scale, the whole, let's say, everything is like that, and God Himself is like that. He's one and He's different, and it's very difficult for us to understand this, how He's both. But we can see even discussing matter, it's very strange. It's not like you think it is. It's very hard to grasp ultimately. So God, of course, is even more than that, difficult to grasp. So, therefore, He's both things. He is the oneness and He's a difference. Yet, though He is both, still we maintain that the higher realization is that of the personal form. The higher manifestation of God is the personal form. That's Bhagavan. And Lord Chaitanya's particular contribution here is that not only is the personal form of God there, but it's not one form, it's two forms. It's Radha and Krishna. We have a dual form of God there. And that is the highest of all. So that was his contribution. The relationships with God are variegated. And even in the perfection of realization, there is gradations of relationship from Shanta to Dasya to Sakya to Vatsalya to Madhurya. And we got various types of relationship within the absolute, realm. Still, we got a hierarchy there until we get the supreme relationship of Madhurya Rasa. And that is Radha with Krishna and the gopis with Krishna. So that's Lord Chaitanya's particular contribution, that even in the spiritual world we'll have gradations like this and things. That's all absolute, but we got all these differences there, and we'll get gradations. And finally we get the highest realization of God, which is that of the gopis. They see Krishna in a particular way, which is the most intense and the most sweet. Nevertheless, all the aspects of Krishna are particularly sweet, even if it's in other modes such as Vatsalya or Sakya or Dasya, whatever. With Krishna, particularly sweet. So that's the other aspect of Lord Chaitanya's philosophy, that Krishna is the sweetest form of God, and therefore the highest form of God, because it's the sweetest. And basically, we're looking for taste. So that's the highest taste of all. Among all the different forms of God, like Narasimha and Vishnu and Rama, whatever, that has the highest taste. Just like we have different juices. We have grape juice and orange juice, lemon juice, and papaya juice or whatever, pineapple juice, sugarcane juice, and then we have mango juice. So all of them, then the best is considered to be mango juice. So it's got the best, fullest flavor to it of all, and that's the highest. So like that, there's all different tastes in spiritual relationship with Krishna, but then the highest one is that was the Raja form of Krishna. That's the sweetest of all. So even in spiritual realization, we'll get all sorts of varieties, and we'll get a hierarchy there. And then finally, even with Krishna, then we'll get a hierarchy there, all the way up to the gopis love of Krishna, and on top is Radha and Krishna. And that's what Lord Chaitanya revealed. When you talk about the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, of course he delivers all the fallen souls, but what does he deliver them to? What he does give them is realization of Radha and Krishna. That's his mercy. Every yuga the Lord comes and delivers the fallen souls, so there's nothing so special about that. But in this particular age, Lord Chaitanya comes and delivers the fallen souls and gives them realization of Radha and Krishna, the highest form. So that's his special mercy. He reveals the love of Radha and Krishna to the jivas. So that's his outstanding contributions for the jivas of Kali Yuga. So that's his contribution. So any question there? We can say it's similar in one sense. Sankhya is not particularly, it's not a particular practice of that. It's like a preliminary where you use your intelligence to understand that we're not a body, we're a soul. It's a basic thing. Jnana Yoga is particular, that we practice detachment and we meditate, I am not this body, I am spirit, soul, etc. And if we get it really into it, then we'll start saying that I am Brahman, I am one with God, and things like this. And that's what the Mayavadis do. They take the Upanishadic statements, I am Brahman, I am one with God, I am the Nirakar Brahman, and they just meditate on these things all the time. And because of that, then that's what they attain.
Say if you want to worship to Krishna, so you want to love Krishna, so to see his personal form, or I'm just trying to get to his the highest.
Yeah.
So obviously in the early stage of our cultivation, we will see a lot of the impersonal form of Krishna through, say, Maharaj giving a nice class, this sort of potency of Krishna coming through Maharaj. So would there be proper for our understanding to see that actually is Krishna coming through you as that they see that actually is the impersonal form of Krishna?
What do you mean impersonal?
So let's say if someone were to be very nice, say they're very nice to you.
Yeah.
So do we see that it's actually the impersonal form of Krishna coming through them?
Impersonal or personal?
Impersonal. Is it correct or personal? I don't know. I just want to ask Maharaj. what would be the situation when you see some incident, let's say a thunderstorm or an earthquake.
Oh yeah.
So if that you see that extreme, obviously is a work of the Lord.
Work of the Lord.
Yeah.
So you're saying is that impersonal or personal?
Is that personal or impersonal?
Well, if you see things of material nature, well, it depends on your consciousness. Yeah? You can see it personally or impersonally. For instance, the person in Prema Bhakti, the Uttamadhikari, he sees every event in the world as related to Krishna somehow or other, and it's in a very personal way, as a part of Krishna's, eternal Leela or something like that. They relate to that way. Whereas someone like a lower person, a materialist, for instance, who's coming out of the material world, can interpret those things also somewhat as connected with God, but in a more impersonal way. So that's where we get meditation on the universal form and things like this, where the person who's still not that much appreciating personal aspect of Krishna and Leela and things like that, he is told to meditate on the material world as an aspect of God, like the parts of the body of God. And they're operating as just like a body operates. So the parts of material nature operating like that as parts of God. So they respect some sort of unity there and some universal law like that, as a body of God. But they don't see the personal form of Krishna, or they don't want to admit that yet. So in that sense, it's more on the impersonal level there. But it depends on your consciousness. For the devotee, he can also appreciate the acts of the material world, and of course that's in chapter chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, the Vibhuti Yoga. You see everything and appreciate the Lord through that. So the devotee is not barred from doing that. He can also appreciate the power of God and different aspects of material nature. But of course that power is a little bit different again from the sweetness of God, which is an aspect of his Leela. This is more like appreciating Paramatma. So when people realize Paramatma, they realize the greatness of God in relation to creation and destruction of the material world. But the sweetness of God is completely different. Got nothing to do with the material world, got nothing to do with creation, nothing to do with greatness even.
So
it's a little different.
As some people go straight to the first 9 cantos, we probably go to canto 10.
Yeah.
Then canto 10 in the form of the Supreme Personality of God.
Yeah.
So if let's say if we were to cultivate in a way that we try to get to the personal level of Krishna.
Yeah.
So
do we have to go to the impersonal first, you're saying?
So that means we have to see that everything, like when someone doing some nice things, whether they criticize you or whether they challenge you or whether they praise you, we will see that actually it's not for you to take the credit. It's actually Krishna using them to come through them to you. Would you do something like that?
All the events of the world would happen. We can see that as somehow Krishna's plan and His mercy to teach us something. That we can see. That's not impersonal. That's okay.
So it means that the moment you start to see everything actually in relation to Krishna,
that's good.
Or even
that's good.
An expression to Krishna, would be on a personal.
Yeah, that's personal. That's personal.
And I hear about the worship. He says that worship means to worship Krishna, basically.
Yeah.
So what would be the guru role in this worship? So some they just want to worship the guru and not Krishna.
Oh, no, that's forbidden. We cannot separate guru from Krishna. We worship guru as the representative of Krishna, and we regard him with great, like Krishna in the sense that he's, we give him equal worship like that. But there's always, guru is only a means of getting to Krishna also, so we can't separate and just worship guru without Krishna, then it becomes meaningless. So the two have to go together.
So we have to worship, but the same thing as we worship the guru is as an expression to Krishna also.
Of course, here it says, as much as you, Yasya Devi Parabhaktir, to the extent that you have devotion to God, bhakti to Deva, Yata Deve Tata Guru, to the same extent that you show your devotion to God, you show your devotion to Guru. but they're not separate. It doesn't say here that you just worship Guru and not God. But to the extent that you worship God, you show the same devotion to Guru. And then the meaning of Scripture is revealed.
Right. So do we have to have like a relationship with Guru, like in the sense that like because in Krishna we have 5 different relationships.
Yeah.
But with Guru, do we have to have like a personal relationship?
Yeah. Without the relationship, there's no transmission of knowledge or mercy or anything. That's basically there. But in relation to Guru, basically it's one of, at least on the broad level, it's one of service, respect and service. Respect and service. Yeah. So we can say it's dasya. It's a dasya mood. No. Yeah. Even with God in general, only dasya is represented. Only with Krishna in his Raja form you get the Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya things. It's only in that Raja Krishna form that we get these. General realization of God is Vishnu, and that's all dasya, servitude, respect and servitude. So that's the general mode.
So then sorry for the long question. Then the last part here about anyone who does not render service and neglects his duty unto the premier Lord, who is the source of all liberty, will certainly fall down from his constitutional position. So if let's say we were to do, like I'm a taxi driver, I'm a grahasta, if I were to do my duty specifically as an offering to Krishna, so is it my prime duty at the moment as a grahasta, or is it I have to come to serve in the temple all the time?
I see. Well, I think when it says neglects his duty under the prime Lord, that means, in other words, we'll do everything except worship Krishna. This is the problem. We refuse the worship of Krishna. The Lord Chaitanya, he doesn't insist that you immediately give up everything and surrender to God, because it would be artificial.
Right.
So therefore he says grihetako vanitako, sadahari baladako, whether you're a grihasta or a renunciate, in any case you perform devotional service. So grihasta obviously means you got a job and you're supporting your family. So it doesn't say you insist you renounce everything. But at least you recognize that you should worship God, and you make that part of your life. But it doesn't become your whole life immediately. So it's a gradual process of attraction to God and renunciation of things. It's not immediate. Okay. Hare Krishna.